and letting the horde in.
Are they coming?
Yeah, sorry, I just needed to adjust a few other settings first.
Yep.
Good afternoon.
Hello, hello.
Good afternoon.
Hello, everybody. So everybody here for the free pizza and the talk on how to make woodcraft models of plastic cars?
Wrong.
Exactly.
Good afternoon.
What, this isn't the 3D printing presentation by Scott?
No, you wouldn't want that.
I could actually use that right now.
Hey, Scott, what was the name of the technique you used to zero or level out your printer? It's like two people's name.
Nope, nope. Nope, nope. Okay,
Hello.
guys, we're gonna the resin printer. Yeah, I forget that right now, but we can get back to that. We're gonna start now, so I think Nathan.
Oops.
Yep. All right, welcome everyone to our Protothrottle new features review and Q&A. My name's Scott Thornton, and I'm one of the developers of the Protothrottle, along with my two partners, Michael Peterson and Nathan Holmes. Michael and Nathan are the owners of Iowa Scaled Engineering, including grain belt models. We are simulcasting this Zoom presentation on YouTube. So if any of your friends could not get access, please let them know that they can watch via YouTube and ask questions from that platform. We will also have the Zoom chat feature active during the presentation for questions, but we're not going to take questions initially. We'll be starting out with a short slide presentation, and then we'll have the Q&A following. So I hope you all enjoy this time. And now I'd like to hand it over to Michael, and he's going to take us through several slides on the new features. So Michael, take her away.
All right, thank you, Scott. So we wanted to cover a couple things today. To start off, we wanted to do a new feature overview of the new firmware version 1.2. We'll talk about how a high-level overview of how to update your throttle for those who might be new to that. We'll have some demonstration videos showing a couple of the new features in action. And finally, we'll wrap up with some Q&A at the end where you can ask any questions you want and hopefully get some answers. So the new features in version 1.2 include a brake test. This is probably the most popular feature. The alerter mode, some new actions you can assign to the up and down buttons on the Protothrottle, a function that can be activated when the reverser is centered, the ability to activate arbitrary functions more easily in the force function menu, and a change or an option to how the throttle automatically goes to sleep. So the brake test, like I said, this is probably the most popular feature in version 1.2. On the prototype, a brake test is typically performed after making up a train or adding or removing cars. The General Code of Operating Rules defines several classes of brake test. Class 1 is the most in-depth. It's done at the initial terminal. It can be time consuming. You check the entire train. Class 2 is an en route brake test. And class 3 is whenever you change the consist, such as adding or removing cars. You want to verify the brake pressure drop at the end of the train to make sure that the brakes will activate. And this can either be done in person with a conductor and a pressure gauge at the end of the car, or using the readback from the end of train device. The brake test feature in the Protothrottle probably best simulates the class 3 type of brake test, a fairly simple brake test. Basically, you wait for the air to pump up to 90 PSI, you apply the brakes, you apply a 26 PSI reduction, and then go on your way. And we do include the option to activate a compressor and air release sound in the decoder if they're available. So how does it work? First thing you do is you enter the special functions menu, which is a new menu added to the throttle, and then click the brake test feature. And when you do that, you'll get this screen shown here in the lower right with a simulation of a pressure gauge and a pressure readout. As soon as you enter the menu, the pressure will start climbing. You wait until it gets to about 90 PSI. The needle on the gauge will move, and the digital pressure reading will also change. During this time, the compressor function on the decoder will be activated. Once it reaches 90 PSI, then you can apply the brakes and do the brake test. And what you do here is you move the brake handle on the throttle to the right until you get a 26 PSI reduction from 90. The pressure reduces proportionally to the position of the brake handle. And at the same time as you're reducing the pressure, it'll activate the brake test function, which typically is assigned to give you an air release sound in the locomotive. After you're done, move the brake handle back to the left, allow the pressure to recover back to 90, and then go on your way. So there's 3 settings associated with the brake test. The first in the configure functions menu is the compressor function. This would be assigned to the function that activates the compressor sound. On a Tsunami 2, that's typically F12, which is brake select. It selects the train line brake. On an ESU type decoder, you would need to consult your function mapping to find where the compressor sound is mapped and then assign that function. The second function you can assign is the brake test function. This is what gives you the air release sound. On the Tsunami 2, this would be F11, which would be the brake. And again, on the ESU decoders, you would need to figure out which function is mapped to an air let off sound or whatever sound you want it to make when you're actually doing the brake test. Finally, there's a pump rate setting in the preferences menu. This lets you vary the time from when the brake test starts until it reaches 90 PSI, anywhere from 8 seconds, which is very fast, all the way up to 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The default is setting 4, which is about 35 seconds. Seems to work well in many cases, but you have the option to vary that faster or slower. If you're running short trains in the summer, you might want it slower. If you're running really long trains in the winter, you might want to have a longer setting. But again, it allows you to customize it to your operating style. The next feature that we've added is the alerter. On the prototype, this is a safety feature that ensures that the engineer remains alert while operating the locomotive. On the Protothrottle, we have a timer that is now active when the reverser is in forward or reverse position. If you move any control or push any button, it'll reset that timer. However, if you haven't touched a control or pressed a button for some time and there's 10 seconds before the timer runs out, the throttle will then activate the alerter function on the decoder, and the screen of the throttle will start flashing and display ALRT. Now, if you press a button or move a control during these 10 seconds, it'll be reset and you'll be fine and go on your way. However, if you don't, and that 10 seconds expires, then the throttle will automatically apply the brakes and bring the train to a stop. At that point, you have to center the reverser in order to reset everything. Now there's two settings associated with the alerter. One is in the preferences menu, and that's the alerter delay. You can either turn the alerter off so this doesn't do anything. It's not active. That's basically how the throttle acted prior to version 1.2. Or you can set a timeout of 15 seconds all the way up to 900 seconds. And in the configure function menu, there is now an alerter function. And this is the function that will be activated during that last 10 seconds. You might assign it to a bell sound, the horn, anything that will get the attention of the engineer and tell them they need to pay attention. A few of the other features we've added in this version of the firmware, like I mentioned up front, the up and down buttons now have some additional settings you can assign to them. One is the brake test. So you can jump directly into the brake test screen without going through the menu. If you plan to use the brake test extensively, you might want to consider mapping it to one of those buttons to make it easier to get into that mode. The other option for the buttons is emergency stop. Normally you can set the emergency stop to activate on the brake lever when you move it all the way to the right, but sometimes people don't want that on the brake lever. And so this gives you another way to still activate emergency stop without it being tied to the brake lever. You can also assign the e-stop to the auxiliary button in the upper left corner of the throttle. There's a reverser centered function. This function will be activated when the reverser is in the center position. You might assign it to a low idle sound, or you might assign it to drive hold on an ESU decoder to allow you to throttle up and down while not moving the locomotive. Finally, in the force function menu, you've always been able to turn any function on or off using this menu. But what's new in this version of the firmware is that the horn lever now, instead of activating the horn, it activates whichever function is selected in the force function menu. So this gives you a quick way to momentarily activate any arbitrary function in your decoder. It could be useful when trying to find out what a particular function does on the decoder. And also some decoders allow you to change the volume by pulsing a DCC function. And so this is just a quick way to go to that function number and then with a few quick flicks of the horn, toggle through the various volume settings. The change to the sleep, there's now a setting under the preferences menu called strict sleep. When it's enabled, the auto sleep of the throttle, where it will automatically go to sleep and conserve battery, only happens if the reverser is centered. And this is the legacy behavior. This is how it's always happened in the past. However, if you now have the option to disable it, and if you disable it, then the auto sleep will ignore the reverser position. So the throttle will go to sleep even if the reverser is in the forward or reverse position. This can help prevent draining the battery if you set the throttle down and often forget to center the reverser. Again, your choice on how you want the throttle to behave. So now I wanted to talk quickly at a high level of how you update the throttle. We've had some people ask questions about this. And so I'm not going to go through every single step, but I wanted to give a high level overview of what the process is. The first thing to know is that this URL, this page I've shown here, has all of the instructions step by step. And so that's your best resource. First of all, you'll need to download the firmware file. It's a .hex file. This can be found on the product page, on the Protothrottle product page on the Iowa Scaled website. We always have the latest firmware files and even some of the older firmware files there to download. Next, you'll want to attach the programmer to both the throttle and the computer. It plugs into a USB port on the computer, and on the throttle end, there's a ribbon cable on the programmer and a matching 6-pin header on the back of the throttle. You just plug that black connector from the ribbon cable into the 6-pin header on the throttle, making sure that the arrow on the ribbon cable connector matches the arrow on the throttle PCB. Next, you'll download the software. We call it MRGUI, and this allows you to do the update to the throttle. We have Windows and Mac versions available. The instructions for installing it are on the ISE website again. And on Windows, you will need to install a driver for the programmer, but inside the Mercury program, under the program menu, there is an install driver setting down at the bottom, and that will step you through the process of installing the driver. So I'm going to do a quick demonstration of actually updating the throttle here. So in the window you see here, this is the Mercury programmer window. In order to update the firmware, I'm just going to go to Program, Update Firmware. Now it's asking me to select the hex file. This is the file, that firmware file that you downloaded earlier. It happens to be in the same directory as the program. So in my case, so I'm just going to double click on this. Once I do that, you'll see this console window come up. What you want to see is this bar moving across the screen like it is. If that's happening, then everything is good. It's working on updating the throttle. If you don't see that, then you probably had a problem. First of all, it writes. It just finished the write, and then it's going to go down here and it will finish reading the throttle back. What you want to look for is that it says such and such number of bytes of flash verified. Done. Thank you. If you see that message, you're good. If you see anything else, if it shows an error or you don't see those bars moving across the screen, then there was something went wrong. In that case, select all the text in this screen, copy it, and paste it into an email, send it to us, and we'll help step you through figuring out why it didn't work. But most of the time, most people, it just works right away. So after that, you're done. The throttle should reboot and you have the new firmware on it. So that's the end of the formal presentation. Next, I'm going to turn it back over to Nathan. He's going to play a couple of videos. The first will show the brake test in action on an ESU equipped locomotive. The next will show the brake test in action on a set of Tsunami 2 equipped locomotives. And finally, we'll have a quick video demonstration of the alerter function in action.
All right. Well, that gives you a look at the videos Michael mentioned. Hopefully everybody was able to see them just fine. Michael, you want to add anything before I kind of open things up to questions?
I don't think so.
All right.
I see we have several questions in the chat already.
All right. Do you want to do those first, or do you want
Yeah,
me?
why don't we take care of the ones in the chat right now
Okay.
while they're here? So one of the questions was, can we send the throttle in to get it updated? Yes. There's several options for doing the update. First of all, you can always do the update yourself, obviously. Secondly, you can send it into us and we'd be happy to update it for you. And the third option is find us at a show. We're planning to be at the Spring Creek show later this year, St. Louis RPM, probably Train Fest. If we're at a show, we typically have a laptop and a programmer with us, and we can do it there too. Next question. The website currently shows the programmer out of stock. That's a mistake. We actually do have some, and I just updated the website. So that should be, at least as of right now, it should be accurate. And typically, if it does show out of stock, we're a week or two out. That's the typical lead time on most things. Will the new bronze throttle through Spring Creek have the current updates and any new throttles going forward? Yes. Any throttles starting with the special faceplate pre-order we did earlier this year, all of those have the new version 1.2 firmware, and going forward they will all have version 1.2.
In addition, anything that comes back for a brake handle repair or anything like that, I usually tend to upgrade it to the current firmware, just to be nice to the customer and make sure you're on the latest and greatest.
Now, we should also mention that if anyone has a question, it can be any question. It doesn't have to be, related to what you just saw in the presentation, because that was just the update. So feel free to ask anything.
I'd like to just point out the prof has offered to reprogram any protothrottles that happen to wind up in Sydney. And we very much appreciate that. It saves us a lot of time and effort shipping them across the pond. So with that said, I'm going to open it up so you can unmute yourselves. I'd ask that you go ahead, ask your question, and then go back on mute if you would. It just helps keep extraneous noise on the meeting down. So here we go.
I just wanted to say that there's a lot of us that have programmers spread around, and if somebody needed a throttle programmed, if you reach out on the discussion group on groups.io, there might be someone close to you that could handle that.
Yeah, that's a good point. There are a lot of people who know how to do it and have done it successfully. And if you're scared to do it yourself, by all means, reach out and either reach out yourself, or again, you could contact us and we can help find someone, maybe find someone in your area. So. Yeah,
especially if you're on the Protothrottle email list. I'm sure if you posted there, if there was somebody in your area that had a programmer, they'd be happy to help.
Yep.
Hello, this is Ferdinand from Switzerland. I just asked about the programmer updater, and we are already 3 guys who are owning one here in Switzerland. I do not know the other guys. Maybe there are some hidden guys that do have protothrottles in Europe, and I would be willing to do the update as soon as I do have the updater.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. Obviously, officially, we can't support any throttles in Europe, but we're happy to help out where we can, and that's purely for legal and regulatory reasons.
Michael, there's another question on the YouTube feed. If you want to take a look at that. Do you have any CV standards?
We haven't developed any standards ourselves. I know a lot of people have sort of developed their own set of standards for their layout. The there's just so many different ways of setting up decoders that it's hard to establish any one standard. If you're looking for a place to start, we have some guides on the website. And again, if you join the group's IO list and just ask on there, I'm sure you'll get some suggestions on a place to start at least.
I've come up with what's turned out to be a really convenient list of how to program your locomotives and stuff, functions that you want to make sure cross over and track through your locomotives. So when you consist and you hit a dead spot or the layout shorts out, they all start up, they all break at the same time. I've also done a couple of videos about how to adjust your braking and adjust your momentum, because different decoders break and have different react to the momentum differently. But I have that on my Facebook page. I'm happy to share that on the IO. I know there's a couple of people I won't mention, and different manufacturers that have used that sheet, and I'm happy to share it with anyone. But it makes it easy to operate your Protothrottle with any locomotive, and then to take that throttle and put it on a regular DCC system, and you still get 99% of the functionality. And I just released a video about programming your basic engines with DCC or DCC and sound. That I don't program all my Tsunami stuff to go crazy with the Protothrottle, just some of my Loc stuff. But I can operate my Broadway and everything together with my Protothrottle without issue, with a little extra programming and a little extra thought. So if anyone's interested in any of that info, check out my YouTube channel for Sean's Trains, or on Facebook, or otherwise I'm happy to share the spreadsheet in the IO chat.
All right, thanks, Sean.
You know, I should say all you modelers that are on the groups.io that have shared, some of you have been really stellar, and I see Pete Mulvaney here. It's nice to put a face to a name. Pete's been very helpful, I know, as one who really helps a lot of the new Protothrottle owners. So thanks, Pete. And it looks like you're broadcasting from inside a cab. You are you truly are the master there.
Well, my railroad never sleeps. I have to work on Saturdays in my beautiful Alco RS11. But in all seriousness, I only know about Loc Sound. But if anyone needs help with setting up Loc Sound in any way, shape, or form, just contact me on the groups.io list, and I'll do my level best to help you any way I can.
Awesome. Thank you.
I have a question. You showed samples for the Loc Sound and the Tsunami. Have you had much experience with the TCS decoders? Because I have quite a few of those and would be interested to make sure that the systems that you have will work with that decoder.
Yeah, so most of the basic functions, things like horn and bell, throttle, all that stuff will work just fine with the TCS decoder. They actually have an interesting brake mode where it's a stepped brake. As you move the brake lever further to the right, you can get progressively more braking out of it. And we do actually support that specific mode specifically for TCS. On the brake test, I haven't been able to find a way to activate a compressor function, for example, on the TCS decoder. So it's a little, I'm not sure how to do that particular feature with TCS. That's why it was left off the list in my slides back there. But you can, I would say 99% of the stuff with the throttle you can do with the TCS decoder. You might have to set it up a little differently, but it's compatible.
Thank you.
Does anyone have experience with programming Tsunami decoders for the Protothrottle? Because I've had a couple of friends try to help me, but they're not familiar with the Protothrottle and how it reacts and everything. And setting up the brake has been difficult. And I'm honestly, I've spent a lot of time figuring out and learning the Loc programmer, and I'm most comfortable doing that. But I want to learn more. Is there anyone that's got good info on that?
Sean, are you talking about Tsunami 2s?
Yeah, specifically Tsunami 2. Yeah, I've got a bunch of the newer stuff from Athearn, like my Wisconsin Southern GP7Us, the F45s, etc. And especially the Jeeps, just because they do have the ditch lights on both sides. One's got a beacon. It would be a lot of fun to switch those over and have those programmed for the throttle, just because you've got all the extra lighting to make the most out of that throttle. And I'm not sure if I want to spend the extra money to put loc decoders in there, but I'm getting close to it. But if I do that, I lose some of the programming easiness of running those with my other Tsunami engines.
I think the secret there is just using the assigned functions in JMRI. And I remapped practically every single function on mine for ease, but I haven't gotten back to using the Protothrottle with it yet. So I haven't tested.
The other thing is that George from Soundtracks is also a heavy Protothrottle user, so he might have some tips beyond what we've put on the website and what have shown up in the list. So you might drop him an email at Soundtracks.
What was his name again?
George Bogatiuk.
Bogatiuk.
He is very, very responsible. I think he's George B at soundtracks.com.
That sounds right. I couldn't come up with his last name. I was blanking all of a sudden.
It's not the world's easiest to pronounce.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Mike, you and I have had a little discussion in the past via email about disconnecting the air compressor functionality during the brake test. When you make your brake application, there's no air demand, essentially, and then reactivating it once the air brakes are being released and the system recharged. Do you see any movement on that?
It will be in the next rev of the firmware. Yeah, at the last minute, I broke a few things on this version, and you kindly pointed that out. I didn't want to go back in and try to fix it last minute because I would probably end up breaking something else in the process. So I deferred that one, but it is definitely on the list to improve how that works on the next rev. Yeah,
I'll be looking forward to that. I belong to the Great Falls Model Railroad Club in Auburn, Maine. We had our first operating session today after more than a year of inactivity with 2 active Protothrottles, and what a blast.
Nice.
Has anyone had issues plugging their Protothrottle receiver into any port other than a standard port? I was operating at a friend's house. I was trying to show off the Protothrottle so he could use it. He's got a beautiful layout. And I brought my throttle with a couple of engines, and I plugged it in, and the only outlet he had available for me to plug into was via his NCE wireless cab antenna. And my receiver, all the correct lights were flashing, everything's blinking right, and the throttle, the blinking light on that was green, so it was connected, but nothing would respond. It was like the antenna, it's like the port was no good, but everything was saying that the info was tracking, that the throttle was connected, everything else. I just couldn't connect to an engine on the track. Any info on that?
Yeah, you can't connect to that radio module. You have to connect to an actual cab bus port. Even though it has the same connector, it's not true cab bus, and you don't have the communication back to the command station.
Yeah, that port is for attaching additional receivers, and I don't remember what the signaling is, but it looks the same, but it's not. The signals don't get through.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Also, is there going to be any easier way to set up the Protothrottle to the Digitrax systems? I know right now, last I checked, it's quite involved with Wi-Fi and all this other stuff. I'm trying to convince a friend with a very nice layout who has chosen Digitrax. The system's probably 15 years old, and I don't know much anything about Digitrax. It's probably been 10 years plus for myself. Is there an easier way to set it up than, what you guys had a few years ago?
No, because the fact Digitrax didn't want to work with us, we were forced to use a documented public interface, and that was Y-throttle, either through JMRI, which is far superior, or through the LNWI, which is easier to set up. But yeah, unfortunately, we've tried to contact Digitrax and it's crickets. So there's not a lot we can do because of how litigious they tend to be around LocoNet. Whereas I'll point out, the reason NCE is by far the best supported is because we called up Jim at NCE, and Jim said, here's a pile of specifications, ask questions when you run into trouble. So, that's the difference between manufacturers, and why NCE is plug and play and why Digitrax is honestly a pain in the butt. Our hands were tied.
Gotcha. Thank you.
May
Sean,
I just,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
don't worry. As you're talking about, I do have the receiver for NCE, and somebody's imported also an NCE system to Europe, but actually I'm losing lens, and that's on the same connector. So this shouldn't be a problem with lens as well, or should I just start using the NCE and stay with the NCE? Because I use the Protothrottle just for a switching layout in O-scale.
Lens actually works just fine. I was a lens user for many, many years, and that was the DCC system I think Michael started developing the receiver with initially. Their cab bus is also extremely well documented and open. So yeah, as far as we know, we have a couple of users on lens, including Joe Atkinson, although I think Joe has recently switched. So lens should work fine. It's just one dip switch on the receiver to tell it whether it's talking to NCE or lens.
Sean, I was gonna say, if your friend has could add an LNWI to their Digitrax, I did operate like that for about first 3 months of my Protothrottle career, and then I switched over to ESU, which has been great ever since. But I believe I might be able to help you if you're able to get an LNWI. I've done that both locally and kind of remotely, not great remote, but definitely locally. So yeah, by all means, ping me if you think he can get an LNWI. I'll do my best to help you anyway.
Well, I did have the Digitrax and the LNWI, and once I was able to program the board correctly to interact with the LNWI, it works fine. So much so that I can even take the LNWI plus the board plus the throttle and plug it into another Digitrax system, and it works fine.
Really?
So it does work, yeah.
Yeah, I had it working
it's
great.
portable for me.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Pete, I'll definitely reach out to you. And thank you, Roger Thomas. I'll probably try to contact you guys through the group. The gentleman whose layout I'm working with, it's a beautiful layout, but it is old. He does not have functioning Wi-Fi at the house, so that makes everything a little bit more difficult because there's also no reception.
Yeah, the LNWI should be able to fix it. Anyway, yeah, contact me on the group and we'll see if we can figure it out.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Any
May I-
ECC users out there? I just got my first throttle, about to learn to figure out how to get it set up. Was looking at initially JMI on a laptop, trying to get that plugged into an easy DCC, but I'm actually setting up a Pi with a monitor on it to connect in that route. Any suggestions from that angle?
The Raspberry Pi works just fine on my layout. No problems. You just have to be able to wire up that special cable to CVP for the USB and get a USB serial adapter. That's probably actually going to be your weakest point, is that the USB to serial adapter. Some of them are a little twitchy.
You hit the nail I was about to ask. Some I understand work, some don't. That's why I moved away from the interface.
Has anybody at ISE maybe talked to Keith, the CVP, about their modifications of the lens bus?
We talked to him early on and kind of got the cold shoulder there too. Is we don't. The response was basically we don't license our throttle bus to other manufacturers. So
They practically got their start by using one that was licensed.
Well, and I'm an old CTC 16E user, so
Wow.
yeah, I go way back. Yeah, I was actually a little disappointed when CVP turned us down, but it's their prerogative. So, but I will say that Easy DCC can be used by a JMRI. We've had a couple of users use it very successfully that way. So, oh, you, Jeff?
Yep.
Okay.
the other system, the MRC system, actually works really well too. If you get their Wi-Fi adapter, it connects right up and we haven't really had many problems with, or any problems with the MRC systems either.
And it'd be interesting to see how TCS's C105 works once they finally get it out the door.
Yep.
Have you guys thought about relocating the loco, select loco in the function cycle so it comes up a little bit sooner than 5 buttons? And not that it's a huge complaint, but or even storing multiple locomotive addresses, kind of like the recall function on NCE.
Well,
Hello, I'm interested.
The load config, you can store multiple configurations in there. And that's what menu 2. I'm looking right here now on a throttle. I guess it's menu 3. The position of menu items can be argued from now until the end of the end of time, because some people are going to want certain things before others. We tried to pick a logical series of what we thought was going to be most used, but you win some, you lose some, I guess.
And I think my last question is just, it looks like when I turn on my throttle, I saw it in the video, it looks like a clock on the bottom of the screen.
Yes.
Like this down here, is that for just a regular fast clock, or is that just a clock?
Yeah, so that will pick up the fast time off of the NCE system. The NCE receiver will actually rebroadcast out the NCE fast time. And so you can display it there. If you also have one of our fast clock systems, which we had on the market and we're reintroducing here later this year, hopefully, it'll pick up that time and display it on the throttle.
Okay, because that's something I was really interested in.
Yeah.
I pick up a little fad, get focused on that, get it working well, go to the next one. And that was one I kind of looked at. I think I contacted you guys about it, and it was just, there's nothing right now that was, you guys are out of stock or something at the time. So I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. So I'm glad to hear you guys are doing that more. And then you've got the additional receiver clocks to broadcast the time. So I'm really looking forward to that as I rebuild my layout. That's going to be a lot of fun. This is going to be a huge part of it. So thank you guys for that.
So the NCE receiver, like I said, will rebroadcast. And Nathan, does the JMRI version of the ESU bridge also?
Yeah, one of the users actually contributed a block of code for the JMRI interface that calls a web service on the JMRI server, and will get JMRI's fast time and broadcast it as well. So that's another option. As far as I've ever been able to tell, the LNWI will not transmit it from the Digitrack system, even though it has it. So I've never found a way to enable it though. So if there's some Digitracks person who knows how that can be enabled, let me know, and we'll add it in. But as far as I know, it's not possible through the LNWI.
Do you guys know of any, I think you get the back case basically from some general supply, right?
Yep.
Do you know of any that would fit that has an openings to make the battery replacement easier?
No, none that are commercially available. There are different color versions. You can get some different colored cases if you want of the same model. It's a Hammond 1591, I think is the case number. But no, there's none that I'm aware of that have a battery cover per se on the back.
Yeah, Hammond 1591 DGY. I've been digging up part numbers for the prof.
Are you thinking of maybe adding on a charger plug, or maybe charging through USB or something like that with batteries rechargeable batteries inside the Protothrottle?
We looked at that early on, and there's some nasty regulations. At that time, it was in California. I don't know if it's gone national yet.
It's national now. It's now a DOE regulation for the US.
There's testing requirements, and which of course means money, upfront money. It adds expense to the throttle itself. And we just decided sticking with AA's, which by the way can be rechargeable AA's. was the best option. If your batteries run out, you can always throw in a set of regular AA batteries and keep going. So we just decided it wasn't worth the effort, the time, effort, and investment to build a charger into this.
Now again, while we can't legally advocate anything, because that would violate our electromagnetic compliance testing and other things, some users on the group's IO list have posted some battery charging circuits that can just be integrated directly into the throttle. Your mileage may vary. I have nothing to do with them, but you might take a look there.
Well, I know that having rechargeable batteries is very, very useful when you've forgotten to put the reverser in the center position.
Yes.
Yeah, you'll notice my dev throttle here, 2 rechargeables.
I've noticed that Duracell seems to last surprisingly long time compared to like Energizer discount brands. Just in my experience, I've got 3 throttles with my 4th on its way, and I bought a bulk pack of batteries and running about 16 to 20 hours a week when I was operating at my max. Those would last a surprisingly long time. I'm not sure why. It's just a regular bulk pack of Duracells, but for those who don't care to change them out, that works. And if you store your throttles, I kept mine in a case while I moved, and they were in there for probably the better part of 6 months, and I had to clean the backs off. So there's some corrosion. So I definitely don't recommend storing the throttle with the batteries in there. That's my bad. So if I just voided my own warranty, I understand.
Don't worry about it. That pretty much our warranty policy so far has been, don't worry about it. We got this. Now, on the other hand, if your throttle comes back, and this comes out of my professional life, if your throttle comes back in a bag, wet, yeah, I'm not opening that. Sorry.
Well, if I have to send my throttle back for something, I'll probably send it back in the factory box, just assembled without batteries and maybe like a $20 bill tucked in there.
That's all fine. Yeah, I mean, for those who are not familiar with the infamous brake handle problem, the first batches of throttles had a steel set screw and a potentiometer on the brake that had a half flat shaft. Initially, we thought that the steel set screw, many of them had sharp points on the end, and we thought that was causing the handle to crack. And eventually the brake handle would just fall off. So we switched to nylon set screws. That helped, but it didn't fix the problem. So we've now taken 2 additional steps. This new batch of throttle has a new potentiometer with a fully round shaft. And obviously we still have the nylon set screws, and we've taken to cleaning any aluminum burrs off the inside of the handles, and we ship them without the handles installed, because one of the things we were discovering is that they were arriving and the impacts in shipping would translate down through the handle into the potentiometer and cause the cracks to appear in shipping. And then, we'd have people who, I just bought this and it arrived and the brake handle suddenly doesn't work. So when you get your throttle back, don't ask where the handles are. They're inside the case, unless you're that one guy who I just forgot them and they're still sitting on my workbench. But normally they are shipped inside the case now, and you'll go ahead and screw them on when you get the throttle back. But hopefully we finally have this brake handle problem fixed, because I'm getting really tired of spending evenings changing out brake potentiometers. And I know it's disappointing for the customers as well when you have to ship it back to me, wait a week and a half to get your throttle back. So we apologize, but we think we got this one licked finally.
Hey, I want to supplement and say you guys have got great service, since I just got my quote unquote new throttle back, because the person that shipped it to me left all the handles on it. And from the guess is the horn lever broke because it protrudes out in the original box. And as you were just saying, oops.
Yep. But yeah, no problem at all. if it happens to anybody, we know it's a problem. We'll take care of you. We've got many customers that can attest to that. So thank you. Appreciate it.
And you forgot to send me no, wait, the handles were inside it for my emails in your email reply this week.
I did that once. I'm very sorry for that.
It's
Out
all
of
right.
curiosity, who's replaced the lanyard for their throttle? I've actually gone to some different hardware because one of the lanyards, the clip on the end that goes on the ring here, actually stuck open and I dropped my throttle. Fortunately, I had quick enough reflexes that I was able to try to divert it with my foot while doing so, sent it sliding along the floor and into a brick wall instead of hitting just carpet. So great news is nothing's broken, but I just out of curiosity, who's changed this out before? All right, I can take a hint.
Handles, kind of looking forward to those new headlight knobs if they ever become available.
Oh, Scott?
Yeah, that was a thing in Scott's direction.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
Scott, you want to comment on the headlight knobs?
I think Scott had to take off. Yeah, he's working on it. Just stay tuned to the Protothrottle list, and I'm sure he'll let everyone know when they're ready.
Yeah, pretty nice looking modification.
Yep.
So the prof asked about red and brass handles. Red handles, I think we have, don't we?
Yeah, we've got lots. Any of the plastic colored handles, we have plenty, and we can make in fairly short order. The brass we are currently out of. I'm not sure. Spring Creek might still have some kits available. You'll have to check with them. We will probably do another run at some point here, but we haven't started it yet.
We got the quote from the machine shop yesterday, and like prices in a lot of places went up alarmingly. So we're trying to figure out what to do about that right now.
Yeah, not just the brass handles, on all of the other machined bits for the throttle. So we're trying to figure out what direction to go there.
One of the things I really liked at one point, you had a 1 1/4 inch handle, brass handle,
Yep.
which I now have on the throttle, and that is great. But I see you've dropped that.
It's when we do the brass handles, it's always part of the brass handle kit. The kit has 1 long and 2 short brass handles along with the red, and then we sell the individual brass handles by themselves. We're just out of the brass ones at the moment.
Well, the typical brass one is 1 inch. This was 1 1/4 inches.
1 1/4. Yeah, those. You're right. Those were special.
Were those the Aranskis?
Yeah, they were the prototypes. So yeah, we probably won't do that one again. We could make a plastic one that size if you really want one that long, but the brass, unlikely.
Unless we could convince Matt to turn us a few more, but
yeah,
those would be an extremely special order because it's a guy I work with who does his own machining, and we wanted some in a hurry, so I had Matt make a few, but those were not made by our usual machine shop. Those were made by a friend of mine in his basement.
What are you guys planning for your next special release faceplate? Since Spring Creek is doing the bronze, I've got the black, the green, and the original gray. You guys have anything else special coming out, like maybe a bulk weathered one?
Stay tuned. There might be some special edition weathered ones. Scott has talked about doing that, but we don't. At this point, we don't have any hard and fast plans for what's next. We'll see what comes up the next time we do a run. Yeah, for anyone who's not aware, there's a very limited number of bronze faceplate throttles. Spring Creek has them all. They're exclusively selling it. We're not selling any through our website, but it's a brownish colored faceplate. We sent them several with aux lights text on them in addition to the ditch lights, but I don't know if any of those are still in stock. I understand they've been getting quite a bit of interest in it. So.
Also, the other thing is, for those who missed the aux lights plates, we might have 1 or 2 extras coming. because we made a few extra plates just in case one got dinged up in transit or damaged in any way during assembly. We wanted to make sure everybody that pre-ordered actually got one. Well, it turns out they all came out just fine, not a ding or a scratch on any of them. So we will have a few extras, and we'll make an announcement probably on the list when we actually get those up for sale.
Yeah, and speaking of dings, every once in a while we get scratch and dent faceplates. I'll have a scratch on it. The anodizing is blemished or whatnot. And we'll put those on the website periodically too at a slight discount. So keep an eye there. We don't really have any rhyme or reason for when they go up, but they do periodically.
Well, I would say your best chance is to check either Saturday morning or Saturday evening, because typically Michael and I do final assembly and test on throttles either Friday night or during the day on Saturday. So if they're going to show up, those are the most likely times they'll show up. And it's,
I think you're missing the boat. If they have dings and scratches, you should call them weathered and charge extra instead of discount.
Yeah, I see Chuck Stansel just said the same thing on there.
Yep.
Yes.
but yeah. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Ferdinand.
No worry. Do I get the infos parallel to list and Facebook? Is that working the same infos, or is there somewhere, as you're already referring to a list, is that a mailing list, or is that some kind of other group I couldn't find?
There's a Groups.io group. I will put the link in the chat here. For those who don't know, this is kind of an open mailing list for Protothrottle users to share ideas and tips and get a hold of us. Scott, Michael, and I all pay attention to it, and we'll respond as we can. Facebook is mostly Scott's domain. I don't spend a lot of time there. Michael occasionally posts something, but the list I generally read as soon as the messages come in. So, and
Yeah.
You don't have to be a member. The whole archive is public and searchable. So
Yeah, announcements will also go out on the Protothrottle Groups.io list. So that's a good place to find out about what's happening.
What's
Thank
As I
you very much.
understand it, as I understand it, the Protothrottle was designed to mimic a early EMD throttle. What would be different if you were trying to manufacture one that simulated a GE locomotive? Much?
depends on which generation of GE. The early U-boats and some of the other weirder stuff had a 16-notch throttle. The brake is going to be pretty standard because it was still just a standard AAR type brake stand. There was still a reverser. And then obviously as you get into the later era, especially with the desk type control stand, you're going to get you're not going to have a side-to-side throttle. There's obviously also, as you get, especially into the second and third generation, dynamic brakes become a lot more common. So you would technically want a dynamic brake lever. And I know that's a feature that gets asked for significantly. The problem is, that adds a lot more mechanical bits in a tiny little space, which would be fine if decoders actually had support for it. But so far, decoders don't have any concept of variable dynamic brakes. It is built into the firmware because using it with a knob or a push button throttle would be extremely difficult. So if and when that ever shows up, we might consider it as a feature. But for right now, it would be a lot of mechanical headaches for no gain in terms of prototype operation. Does that help?
So I have a question that's only related to the brake test. And a real life engineer may be able to answer this. So when you're doing the brake test, what keeps the train from creeping away?
to be secured in some fashion so that that doesn't happen. Certainly the locomotive brakes would be applied because they're controlled independently of the train brakes. If that's not sufficient to hold the train in a particular location, a sufficient number of handbrakes would have to be applied on the cars to keep the train stationary while the brake test was being conducted.
Okay, thank you.
Question on range and walls, kind of a two-part question. Just curious what the general comfortable range folks have found in a solid large room from where the Wi-Fi receiver is to the throttle, and then impact of having like a second room or in a home like you have a second bedroom going through a normal 2x4 wall. What kind of range folks have been running into, finds, pros, cons?
And well, I could say my basement's about 39 by 25, obviously usual concrete tank in the ground, and I can operate a loco anywhere on the layout from in my backyard. Not that I typically, although now of course I have my VR headset coming, I know anyway. But yeah, so pretty good, I would say. Certainly, I would hazard it's 50 feet through the concrete or across the wood and down through depending on the path it takes. So I'd say better than Digitrak's wireless throttles and better than ESU, the first version MC2 throttles anyway. So certainly plenty workable for my situation.
The Protothrottle radios are based on an industrial standard called 802.15.4 that's designed to cut through all sorts of interference. We've set the power levels as high as we can without running into what they call SAR testing. Basically, it has to do with how close your hand is to the antenna, which is part of the reason for the slightly uncomfortable box. Not that we would violate it, it's just testing is about $20,000, and guess what? That all gets passed on to you. So the radios tend to be very reliable. Mine will connect to my layout, and it's 2 floors below me and through, well, 2 floors and 2 walls, one of which is concrete. So, and we've run it. We've actually accidentally taken over somebody's train from across the hall at a train show, very large train show before. So they do have quite a bit of range. The one person we ever have known that's run into problems with our radios was going through 2 1-foot thick brick walls. And that seemed to actually knock the signal down. But otherwise, it's not a problem we've really heard of.
Thank you.
Do you guys by chance have a recommended decoder? Like if there's one brand or one decoder that was like, that's the one to use with the Protothrottle to make the most of everything, the best, easiest to program, what would that be?
Oh, I just remembered I have to go to the dentist in Anchorage. Bye.
Yeah. There is no magic bullet.
Yeah, they all have their pros and cons. I wouldn't be able to say there's one that's better than the other as far as working with the Protothrottle.
I mean, Michael and I are both N scalers, so our choice on sound decoders is pretty darn limited. ESU is by far, the best option in N scale because your other options are MRC, which I found to not be terribly reliable with their sound decoders. And, a lot of the others don't make drop-ins of any sort. So you get to do a lot of wiring. Once you get to HO, Soundtrax makes an excellent decoder. ESU makes an excellent decoder. TCS makes an excellent decoder, but they all do different things slightly better than the other. So.
Hey, Nathan, I think I'm going to make you and Michael at least mildly happy. George Bogatiuk pre-announced a Next 18 decoder, Tsunami 2, on Ken Patterson's show this week.
I had not watched Ken's show this week. Thanks, Jeff. Yes, that does make me happy.
And I immediately questioned him if it would be a drop-in replacement for the Lokesound Direct on the HO, because it's basically a Next 18 on a motherboard, and he believes so.
That's good news. Yeah, Soundtracks are good people. I mean, they're fellow Coloradoans, same as us, but they've been nothing but supportive with the Protothrottle and everything else. So I can't say enough nice things about them. ESU has been as well. I mean, they've both been very supportive. So, you know, I don't want to pick sides between them. They both do different things extremely well. In my opinion, I like the sound that comes out of the Tsunamis a bit better, but I like the configurability of the ESUs better. I mean, the ability to just whip out a local programmer and remap functions and change sound schedules. I mean, that's just brilliant. But when it comes right down to it, the Tsunamis come mostly configured to what you need, and the Soundtracks' sound quality is second to none. So.
Awesome, thank you. I know I prefer Loc myself just because I've spent so much time on the Loc programmer. The first 3 engines I did were Loc, but it'll be tricky to learn the Tsunami programming through JMRI, I think it was. But I'm really looking forward to it. There's a lot of cool stuff out there, and your throttle just makes everything way cooler, way more exciting, way more fun. I actually took this weekend off for this, and I've spent all of this morning until 3 o'clock programming my entire fleet of engines because I haven't had time to do it since I moved here a little over a year ago. And it's just so fun. I can grab a steam engine and like 3 diesels and run them together with my Protothrottle now. It's so much fun. So thank you guys for that, because it's changed model railroading for me, and I've convinced a couple of people who have left the hobby to reconsider because I had them over to run it. And they said this was a game changer, and they're absolutely right. So thank you guys so much. And again, for the support. I mean, just the fact that you guys do stuff like this where we can interact with you. It's not just a chat while you guys are on, YouTube or Facebook, just broadcasting. I think that speaks a lot to the quality of the product and the people who make it. So thank you so much.
Hey, we appreciate the enthusiasm. We're glad other people enjoy it too. I remember so Scott asked us, so some guy built a control stand kind of throttle out of an NCE throttle. For those of you who haven't heard this story, man, Sean, you're making me want to go get a beer right now.
I got Dots pretzels too, if you want some.
Now you're killing me, man. Anyway, Scott came to us and showed us this video, and we went, well, that's kind of neat, and it's a novelty. And Scott's like, can you build me one? We're like, all right, we'll build one. Well, I think it started off with no, Scott, no, Scott, no, Scott. And after a couple of months, it was fine. We'll build you one, Scott. And then Michael actually got into it and kind of showed that there's something to this. This changes your mindset about, operating. And I still was kind of dismissing as, yeah, sure, whatever. And then he put it in my hand, and yeah, I was sold within minutes. So that's how the Protothrottle came about, for those who don't know.
Yeah, I wanted to add to what Sean said. This, for me, the ultimate game changer, the biggest thing in the hobby since, I would say, even bigger than DCC or sound, to be honest, in terms of how it's improved my sort of engagement and enjoyment of the hobby. But I also want to say that, mechanically and electronically, for you to put this together with the resources that you have is astonishing that it worked as well as it did first time out of the box. A couple of minor hiccups, but that's way less than some of the much bigger companies that have brought complex throttles to the table and had to go around 3 or 4 times till they got to version 3.0. And I watched your, market sort of R&D over 18 months through MRH and other channels, and I was just engaged with it from the beginning, and I can't tell you how impressed I am and happy I am that you got it over the finish line. So great stuff, and thank you very much indeed for that.
Thanks, guys. We appreciate that. All right.
May I add some little bit thing how I came across your throttle? It was actually a friend of mine. He told me about it, and I thought, well, I once was able to run a CF7 in 1-to-1 scale on the railroad, and then I thought, well, this would be really cool if I now have that locomotive in O scale, and I also have the Protothrottle for it. So this is as close as I can get to a US locomotive over here in Europe.
Well, fantastic. I'm glad you found it, and I'm glad you found a way to get it into Europe. We had one last night that was going to Wisconsin, but the payment address was in the UK. So I know y'all are figuring it out. And
Well,
yeah, I got mine. Mine was already here in Switzerland, and somebody was selling it secondhand, and it was such a good price, so I had to run over the next day just to be sure that I get it.
Fantastic. And I can say, I have people operating regularly every week here on my layout with Protothrottles from all over the world, and and it's just astonishingly fun and realistic, and we absolutely love it, and can't say enough about it. And it's been seamless, with that one firmware update that you did for us, the COVID Hermit edition. It just works all the time from anywhere on the planet. It's just remarkable. So good stuff.
I need to speaking of which, Pete, I need to roll those changes back into an actual update for the ESU bridge. It's been on the to-do list, but my day job has been killing me for the last 6 months. So
no worries. It's working great for us.
The fast clocks are on indefinite. I'm behind on those. Though the plan is to actually get them done and out and for sale again in time for Spring Creek's show at the end of July. So hopefully I'll catch up this summer.
Well, just so you know, we've got people coming in directly to my ESU command station, cab control command station on my LAN, and then through that port, and then they also come in through JMRI directly onto the through JMRI onto the ESU system as well, and both work equally well.
Excellent. I've loved the fact that you've gone to remote operations. It's kind of an interesting concept. It's something I always wanted to try. I always kind of figured out, well, my own assumption was that the dispatcher job was the one thing that you could probably do remotely. But yeah, I think you've shown us that you can do a lot more than that, especially with modern technology. We can send video back and forth.
And actually, there's someone on this call from the UK who remote conducts here. And if you think what that entails in terms of, never seen the layout, never been in the room, but with the schematics and everything else, he can remote conduct a Protothrottle user in Australia running the locomotives, and all I do is basically rail fan and walk about throwing a few switches down again. So I mean, it's astonishing, and really Protothrottle was a driver of all this to get that level of engagement. So amazing.
Welcome to the amazing world that is the 21st century, eh?
Yeah, there's a few good bits to it, right? It's a silver lining of COVID, you might say, I suppose, in a way. Because I don't think we ever would have gone there if it wasn't for this damn virus. But yeah, we'll take it. It's a nice silver lining to have, right?
Yep. All right. I know we're running a little over time. Any other questions?
Just a quick question. You referred to the JMRA clock going through the ESU bridge. Can you just elaborate on that just a little bit?
There are, let me switch over to my other monitor here and pull it up. There are a couple lines at the bottom of the Protothrottle configuration file. That's not the one I wanted. There we go. They're missing from this version. I'm gonna have to go find them, and I'll send an email, George. But suffice to say that JMRI provides a number of web service interfaces, one of which allows you to get the current fast time information. One of our users, I can't think of his name, Thomas, last name eludes me at the moment, sent me a patch for the ESU bridge code that will query those web service interfaces. Sorry, Prof. We'll query those web service interfaces and get the fast time and then broadcast it out on the Protothrottle radios. So I'll have to go find the configuration lines, but yeah, it's pretty easy to add in. You basically just tell it, here's where the JMRI server is, and go ahead and turn it on.
Okay, that's great, because when I'm plugged into NCE, I've got no problem. But when I use the little DCC++ system, if I can get the JMRI clock, that'll be great.
Sure. Yeah. Tell you what, I'll go figure out how that works again and put out an email to the Protothrottle list either this evening or tomorrow.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Sure.
Without naming any names, this is a bit of a random question, but do you guys know what the most number of Protothrottles on a single layout is currently?
The most I know of at the moment is 8 on a guy who models the KCS.
So he's using 2 different receivers?
I don't actually remember what he's using for a receiver. The NCE receiver can, in theory, handle up to 26. Now, realistically, you start running into some bandwidth constraints on cab bus and one slot when you put that many throttles on one receiver. If you're running road trains, it's not a big deal. If you're doing a lot of switching, then you're sending a lot of function commands and it quickly kind of overwhelms and you need a second receiver. I think he's only running with one receiver.
I don't know if anyone's familiar with NAPM, North American Prototype Modelers in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I know they have a massive layout. They have a lot of guys who love the Protothrottle and operate with it regularly. From what a couple of people have told me from going there, unless there's someone else here that can speak to it otherwise, I know they've run at least a dozen or more at a time. As far as how many receivers they actually use, I'm not sure. It's probably 2 based on the size of the layout, but I know I've run on layouts with 6+ regularly. So it is fun, but it's I don't know when I don't know if you want to find out when you run out of that bandwidth.
And like I said, a lot of it depends upon the use case too, because one of the early starved bandwidth cases that we had to sort of look at was on John Parker's BNSF Fall River sub. And in his case, it was because LocoNet just wasn't calling the LNWI fast enough. The LNWI was sending, because he runs all of his signals, all of his, dozen operators, everything over one LocoNet. And it was just starving for bandwidth. So in that case, it wasn't the receiver choking up. It was just the layout bus choking up. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it very much depends upon the use case. The NCE receiver, if you're doing a lot of road trains and not a lot of switching, then you're sending maybe a command or 2 a second, plenty of bandwidth for that. But if you're running 8 switch jobs all through one receiver and they're all trying to send 10-15 functions a second, you're going to choke a little bit. So a lot of my usual advice is 6 to 8 on an NCE receiver unless they're all road trains, but that's kind of a rule of thumb. I'd give it a shot before you spend money. Jeff, does that work?
Jeff,
right.
you're on mute, I think.
Yeah, I think you were on mute, but.
Okay, I was hitting the space bar. Basically, the question is a curiosity as much as anything, but that was really interesting. What is the limitation on the Wi-Fi side? The ESU bridge, I guess it's called.
In theory, there's no limitation. Well, there is sort of a limitation because the Y-throttle protocol assigns a cab letter. So 26, again, with it would be primarily limited by how fast either the LNWI can talk to the command station or JMRI can talk to the command station. But there shouldn't be a limit there. The LNWI is limited to 4 inbound connections, but the way the ESU bridge works is it pools all the throttles through one connection. But I found it starts choking after about 4 or 5. So just because of its internal bandwidth limitations. But if you're talking to JMRI, you can probably run all 26 through it and not have a problem.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think my experience has been the only time you get any noticeable slowing with multiple PTs through one receiver is if they're all using, as you said, a lot of switching with a 0.2 second pulsing on the brake. And people, one thing I have to tell people is make sure that if you're moving along, your brake is fully off, and if you're stopped, it's fully on, and only take advantage of proportional braking, while you're doing some proportional braking, if you know what I mean. So if you happen to have all 3 or 4 users doing that, a lot of pulsing all at once, you can notice a little bit of maybe delay on the next horn blast that someone tries to do. But overall, we've never had it fall over or break or stop working, whether local or remote use through either JMRI or directly to ESU at least.
Thank you.
Any other last questions?
Question, but thanks very much, guys, for doing this. This is pretty cool, and we look forward to maybe doing one again in a bit.
Sure. Yeah. This one actually I think went well. Michael, wouldn't you tend to agree?
Yeah,
We'll
I think you
make
did.
this kind of a regular event.
Yeah, thank you for everyone for joining and your questions.
I did come up with one other question. I just joined a few minutes ago. I apologize for being late. I've been working with the Protothrottle and working well with it, but I've noticed recently when I put my locomotives on and I throttle up through the notches, the locomotive wants to stay in an idle sound for the prime mover. And these are Tsunami 2 sound units. Now, when I go back and put it on my Digitrax, then I get the normal range through the notches as I throttle up the locomotive. So I'm wondering if there's a setting on my Protothrottle that I've somehow caused that to happen.
Very possible. Does the locomotive move and you just don't get the prime mover sound?
That's correct, Michael. Exactly what you described.
Huh. Nothing's coming to mind immediately, but I'm sure there's a setting somewhere in there. Email either the Protothrottle list or us directly, and we can step through some questions to try to figure out what might be set.
Okay.
One thing to look at, one thing you might just do initially is go into the force function menu on the Protothrottle.
Yes.
And make sure they're all set to the -- setting. If any of them set to on or off, make sure you know why it's set to that. Sometimes a function will get turned on in there, and it can cause the decoder to do weird things because you're setting a mode that you didn't expect on the decoder.
That's a good point. I think I do have, if I range through the force function, I might have 1 or 2 that are set to on.
Yeah, try setting those to the -- setting and see if that fixes the problem for you. That's
Okay.
what I would try first anyway. If that doesn't, let us know. We'll try to figure out what's going on there.
I'll say I will show you one handy trick that a lot of you may already know, but so can you see the screen, Michael?
Nah, it's all turn the
Yeah.
backlight's pretty bright on it, but you can't turn it off in that menu.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Either way, if you go into the diags menu and you're sitting on this screen and you push the upper right button, there we go. It'll say FN0 or FN00 plus, and it will give you some numbers out here. That'll tell you what functions between 0 and 9 are on. And you can push it again and it'll say FN10 plus. And that's functions between 10 and 19. And then push it again, it's FN20 plus. That allows you to see what functions the throttle thinks it's turning on. And then you can work backwards from that well, why is that function on? Because a lot of times, yeah, as Michael said, you'll get one that either you mapped a function you didn't think you mapped, or you've got like the aux button down and you forgot about it, or you've gone into force function by accident and triggered something. But that'll show you the actual functions that the throttle thinks it's sending to the command station. And usually the problem is one of those, and then all you have to do is figure out which one it is that's causing the problem and why it's on. But you can then simulate it with like a normal Digitrax or NCE throttle. You could just turn on the same functions and go, oh, well, that one causes the same behavior. That's the function that's causing the issue.
So for the braking, the variable braking to work, I've got a couple of Loc sound decoders as well as Tsunami 2. Do I have to, on that force function, don't I have to have that on in order for the braking to work, either 10 or 9, I think it is? They're different on the different decoders.
No, so what the force function menu does, it allows you to turn that function on, turn it off, or allow it to be automatically controlled by the throttle. So that dash setting in the force function menu actually means that the throttle can automatically control that function. If you set it to on, that function is always going to be on. So if you turn on the brake function, for instance, in the force function menu, and you try to move the brake lever, the brake function will always be on regardless of the brake setting, because you forced it on. And then similarly, if you set it to off, no matter what you do on the throttle, that function will be off. It will never activate. So really, most of the time, you want that dash setting in the force function menu for all the functions. That way, your brake lever, for instance, can control the brake. And the way you tell the brake lever, do this function for the brake, is through the configuration function menu, the config func menu. There you would set it to be F10, F11, whatever the number is, not in the force function menu.
Yeah.
The purpose of the force function menu is, say you have some step lights or the number boards mapped to a certain function on the locomotive, and you can go into that menu and turn them on without having to consume, say, one of the buttons on beside the LCD screen to do that. It lets you access some of the other functions of the DCC decoder that aren't mapped to one of the controls on the faceplate of the throttle.
Now I'm going to go through and put them all on dash dash. I'm looking at it right now and I see my function 00 is on. So that should be dash dash.
Yep. Yeah. So that means your headlight is forced on no matter what. So start with them all at dash. And like I said, unless you have a really good reason and can articulate the reason why you set it to on or off, it probably should be set to the dash setting.
I can't articulate it, so I'm put the dashes
okay.
in.
Hey, Jim, if you get stuck on Loc sound braking, just ping me on the groups.io list. I'll try and help you if I can.
All right, Pete, I appreciate that.
No problem.
I also want to mention one other new feature that's in the new firmware that Michael and I have not publicized yet, because there's no way to use it unless you're pretty much us. But we've added the ability to upload and download configurations over the radio. So I've got a working prototype where I can pull configurations off my throttle, edit them, and then send them back to the throttle. It's not a very friendly interface at the moment. In fact, I actively call it user hostile. I know Martin is working on an interface as well, but we've put some of the groundwork in place to be able to upload and download configurations from your computer without having to edit everything on the throttle.
So Nathan, would that mean if you had, let's say, 3 Protothrottles, you could set one up for exactly how you want it and then copy it over to the other 2?
Yep.
Lovely. Thank you.
Wow.
Very nice.
That's
Fantastic.
super cool. Do you think we'd ever get to the point where you could transfer a configuration from one throttle directly to another?
It is certainly possible. It's like I joke with people at work, well, can we do, it's just software, people. I can do whatever. If a computer can do it, we can do it. Yeah, it is absolutely possible that in the future we might add the ability to transfer directly from one throttle to another. Initially, my focus has been on providing a GUI that you can use on a computer. Now, nobody get too hopeful about that. My life through the summer is a bit busy. So Martin may very well come up with something long before we do. But eventually it will happen. And adding the ability to send a configuration from one throttle to another is just an extension on that same capability. So
Even being able to just do it through a computer would actually be pretty handy. That's for sure. Thank you.
Oh yeah, the thought that you could just like email somebody, a remote operator, my standard config, which all my locos are the same, and they could load it into one config slot, like 20, and just leave it there for whenever they want to operate here, and only have to select the loco address each time would be fantastic. So that's exciting.
well, I hope maybe by fall to have something out that is at least a test version for people who are adventurous.
Very
Like
good.
I said, it all works for me just fine, but I'm running it all from the command line and editing things with text editors. So user hostile.
No problem.
Well, we're glad you're taking on that hostility for us.
All right. Well, we've now run half an hour over what we thought we were going to do. So I hate to cut into your afternoons anymore. So any last questions? Otherwise, I think we'll sign it off for the day.
Thanks,
I just
guys.
want,
Thank you.
yeah, I just wanted to quick thank everyone in the chat and for all the people, you know, even the ones that aren't here that might be watching or didn't have time. They're just helpful in any way, whether they be YouTubers, people on the Facebook chat, on the IO. It's helpful. And it's without people like that, this would be much more difficult because obviously the people, you know, Nathan and Michael and Scott only have so much time to give to assisting people. So it's nice to have that source. So just thank you guys, everyone. You know, people like Pete Mulvaney here, you know, thank you for saying that I can contact you. Stuff like that makes the hobby a better place. And this is obviously a great place to be. So thank you guys, everyone.
Yeah, I want to echo what Sean said. Sean, Pete, everybody else who participates in the list and on Facebook and everywhere else. Thank you, because for those who don't know, this is not Michael and I's full-time job. We're lifelong model railroaders, and this is a side gig that gets shoved in late at night and, you know, on weekends and other things. But yeah, I mean, during the week, it's, you have full-time professional office jobs, family commitments, other things. So we really appreciate the community that's built up around this and the willingness of everybody to step in and help a little bit. It makes our life a lot easier, especially considering, you know, when a question comes in about some oddball decoder we've never seen, don't have an example of, anything else. I'm amazed how many times on the list somebody will show, oh yeah, I've got one of those and this is how you change it. And it's one of these, just set it up like this. So thank you all. We very much appreciate it. All right.
Okay.
With that said,
Have a good night. And here it's 11 p.m. and I call it a day.
sounds good.
Good night.
Thank you all
Bye-bye.
for coming. We very much appreciate it. You all have a good weekend, and we'll do this again, either probably late summer or early fall. How's that sound? All right. Have a good day, all.